Welcome everyone to the Hearthstone GvG meta report for week number 7. It's been quite an exciting week. We've seen a lot of developments, so let's kick it off. First up, we're going to talk about Druid. Yes, Druid. Alright, so what we've been noticing in Druids is because of another new deck that we'll actually be covering here, they've changed the way that they're operating, mostly from 10 up. What we've been seeing is the reintroduction of Ancient of Wars and Sen'jin Shieldmasters into their deck designs. So as you can see here, you've got your typical ramp Druid, which operates on getting early ramping abilities off of Wild Growth and Innervate to put out big minions or higher value minions that your opponent can't deal with or compete with. Once they've established this, they just march on down. Now, this deck also runs Zombie Chows. Just in case they don't hit the ramp, it's one or the other. So they're kind of increasing their viability a little bit against aggro and just buying themselves that little bit of time they need. Now, in this variant, it runs a Harrison Jones, which is really nice. I've seen other variants that have said, screw Harrison Jones, and actually go for Sneed's Old Shredder just for the lull factor. And yes, it's a lull factor. While not completely game winning, it's one of those things that just generally frustrates your opponent into conceding. So once you've established a board, you build up what you have, you don't even need the Force of Nature. As you'll notice, it's not here, neither is Savage Roar, because this deck literally beats you on sheer willpower of big ass minions that you can't compete with. And it works pretty damn good. It actually shuts down a lot of decks. Alright, next up, Hunter. So, Hunter has pretty much been maintaining its dominancy within the meta. In top rank play, it changes up quite a bit. They're dropping the explosive traps and opting instead to go for freezing because they're not facing up against as many aggro decks. So, now here you got a deck that synergizes very well with Snake Trap as well as with Unleash the Hounds. It's got the Death Rattle curve that we all know quite well. This deck will probably do you marginal below rank 10, but if you still may want to consider changing up the traps a little for some AoE. This is kind of important. Now this is also not your pure Face Rush Hunter deck that we've seen. This is actually a more controlled variant to a degree, has many options to defense up, from Sludge Belcher to Houndmaster, and it's also got the high mains because, well, they're just a pain for everybody to deal with, and even is running a one-off of Paladin Shredder for a mid-sized minion. So it's a very nice deck, very standard and typical of what you're going to see from Hunters. Alright, Mech Rattle Mage. I featured this deck this week on Deck Talk, and the deck is actually surprisingly good. After a series of really bad tilting on the ladder, I dropped myself down to 13. After seeing this deck and seeing what it can do, I decided to play it. I literally rode it from 13 to 7 in 20 games. Now that may not seem all that spectacular. In all honesty, it almost hit 6 and then went back and then came back up again, so I had to count that in the testing. So in 20 matches, I advanced that far. Now, it's an amazing deck. It has a little bit of a learning curve, and you can get some really interesting stuff thanks to Unstable Portal. This has led to a few really fun videos, I might add. Alright, so it plays very similar to most mech mages, but as you'll notice, it does not have Mech Warper. It does not have any early game drops. So no Mechanical Gnomes, no Annoyotrons. Nope. Your early game is pretty much consistent of either Undertakers or the Mana Worm. Sad fact. Getting Undertakers out and then using Death Rattle synergies is really nice. And then towards your mid game, playing the Harvest Golem down on turn 3 to buff up your Undertaker as well as put a sticky minion down is really good because you can follow it up with the Goblin Blast Mage. This is a huge tempo swing. This deck crushes warrior control about 80% of the time. However, it does suffer against one deck, and that is the Druid deck we just covered. This is actually probably the reason why Druids have switched away from Force of Nature combo decks to something a little bit more in line with what we saw back in CBT. Yeah, they just got tired of getting zerged by Mage and Zoo and everything else. Alright, so the deck is very solid. I highly recommend this if it's a little pricey. Alright, you know, the Black Knight, Sylvanas Windrunner, Dr. Boom, Blood Mage Silence, those are a little pricey. But it's definitely a good deck. Alright, moving on. Paladins. What can you say about Paladins? They find one good deck and that's it. Alright, so here we have another typical control-based deck. Now, what you'll notice here is there's no zombie chows. I know. Instead, it's almost completely reliant on the shielded mini-bots, which, you know, it has two. It has very little low drop, so a lot of your early game is going to be shielded mini-bots and your tokens. This kind of sucks. You may actually be forced to use a muster for battle earlier on just to kind of stave off to where you could get to more of your mid-game where you could finally start doing things. The deck does feature a couple of health resets in the forms of an NT Killbot and a Lay on Hands. It's only got 3 taunts, one of which I might like to add is Tyrion Fordring. And because taunts are so annoying, it does run the Black Knight and Dr. Boom because, hey, it's Dr. fucking Boom. Alright, typical combo here. Piloted Sky Golem has a huge amount of value in this deck. I've been just loving the amount of creativity I could get off of the Piloted Sky Golem. I've been having so much fun with that. So it's definitely worth checking out if you're more of a Paladin fan and you like a little slower paced game. Just a word of warning, aggro will eat you alive. Alright, moving on to the class that everybody seems to hate, and that is Priest. Why does everybody hate Priest? Because they're actually pretty good against so many damn things depending on their build. Today we're going to be looking at the Holy 4000. This deck actually has a very nice guide. I highly recommend checking it out. So let's get into this. Foe Reaper 4000! What the hell? Yes, here's a card you generally don't see much in the meta, and that's why it's pretty fucking great here. Vol'jin, Paladin Sky Golem. Holy crap, this is some really strong shit. Jeeves, okay, card draw, but aren't you already running Northshire Clerics? Yes, but who cares? More card draw. Alright. So, the idea of the deck is literally to put out minions that have a higher value than what your opponent can do. You start looking at some of the stuff here. Mechanical Yeti, okay, it's on par with a regular Yeti. Sure, why not? Tinkertown Technician, value. Spider Tank, value. Upgraded Repair Bot, wait, what? Yes, Upgraded Repair Bot. That way you can turn any minion into a high value minion. Something that'll generally take 2 to 3 minions to trade into. Alright, so where this gets really cool is when you look at Vol'jin. He fits perfectly fine in this deck design of forcing you to trade 2 for 1 into. The deck does not run many offensive spells, to be perfectly honest with you. 1 Holy Fire, 2 Holy Nova. It is running Silence, cool. Shadow Word Deaths, Power Word Shields, and 1 Shadow Word Pain. It's very control oriented and can just beat your opponent on sheer force of will. And that's pretty cool. Paladin is probably going to give this deck a little bit of a problem because of the combo. Hunters, you're going to have a little difficulty zerging this down. Though, as you'll notice, there's no taunts. But remember, Priest can heal their face. It's also not running any mind game trickeries, not running any thought steals, any of that stuff. So it's a pure, straight up Priest deck. But apparently it works, so worth a check. Alright, next we have is Rogue. Now, while testing a lot of these decks out, I kept running into pretty much the same damn Rogue deck all over the place. So I went looking for this, and lo and behold, person who I know played in some of the tournaments that I used to run, Shannon Casual. Now, this guy is a legend in his own right, period, point blank. This deck is budget cheap, very nasty. It is running 2 epics. Alright, sorry, but you have to make some sacrifices here, people. Now, what makes this deck good is the fact of the matter is it's pure mech. So you got Cogmaster, it's great turn 1 play. Follow that up by Annoyatrons, Mech Warper, whatever. And what gets really cool is once you have that Annoyatron down, the first thing you want to do immediately following that is play an Iron Sensei. This guy is a nightmare. Almost everybody's going to be focusing on your Mech Warper, and that's what you want. Let them waste that easy answer on the Mech Warper so they don't have shit for the Iron Sensei. I've seen this guy spiral out of control so much it's not even funny. You get 2 of these guys down there, GG. Just you're done. It's GG. Bye-bye. You're done. The amount of value you can get off this, we're talking like turn 4, you've already got like 6+ attack minions smacking the living crap out of you, if not worse. Alright? It's huge value. It's almost as toxic as Zoo. But now here's the really cool thing is you're not going to be trading with your minions as much as you might think because you have the ability of bringing out weapons, because you have some spells and Blade Furies and Deadly Poisons, things of that nature. You're going to be actually using your weapon, i.e. Cogmaster's Wrench, to do a great amount of trading. And when trading is obviously not apropos, your opponent's flooded the board, well then you have Blade Fury to just get rid of everything. It's really kind of cool how that works, isn't it? Alright, moving on to the next deck. We have is the Shaman, Glory of the Elemental Lords. Now, I played this. I really did. At first, it took me a minute to understand how everything interacted, how it was supposed to work. And at first, it just kind of, I was playing it like your typical Shaman deck. And yeah, I was getting some mixed successes with it. But what I started realizing is, hey, I've got a lot of things to really annoy the hell out of my opponent in the endgame. So I started messing around with this. And what I discovered was, if I was able to hold off that early game using Zombie Chows and Haunted Creepers, I was golden. Because I could curve out almost perfect in every single way, always have an answer, and leave them with minions that they couldn't do much about. And then either finish them off with a very interesting combination play and throwing Kel'Thuzad at the back end, or just, you know, Ragnaros YOLO, or Alakir Windlord. So much value. There was just so much value. The only card in this deck I feel is I'm a little ambivalent about is the Crackle. I know why it's there. I just think Lightning Bolt is situationally better in so many different instances. But this Crackle actually ended up winning me the game because of the Azure Drake and the Totem. So that was really cool. In control matchups, this deck does pretty good. In aggro matchups, it breaks about even. It has the tools to deal with aggro quite nicely, but hey, good hands are good hands. Something you have to learn to come to expect. But it's a good deck all around. So I would recommend getting it. If you don't have Alakir, you may want to consider getting them. Alright. Moving on to the next deck we have is Warlock. Yes, Warlock. Alright, so Sea Giant Zoo. I had somebody try to tell me, oh, there's no Zoolocks up in Legend. No. You're full of shit. No. I sit there and watch that all day long on different streams. No, there are. Alright, so Zoo Sea Giant. How this basically works is, hi, you have Implosion. Probably the most broken spell in the game. It basically is a removal spell, variable, that gives you minions, variable. This allows you to get a lot of value out of it. Plus, hey, it's great for building up your board so you can get out your Sea Giant. Now, this deck only runs one Sea Giant, which, you know, okay. It has a lot of other nifty tools. Cool. Almost everything you come to expect from a Zoo deck is here, including Doom Guards. Now, it's also running Echoing Ooze, and people are like, well, that's not really that great. Minion, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff. Yes, but you get 2 1/2s for 2 mana. And on turn 6, you could play this with a Defender of Argus and get even more value. So, yeah. Yeah. So, it's a very strong deck. I like it. I think it has a lot of potential, and it's very easy for people to play and make. If all you really need to do is get one Sea Giant if you've already got Naxxramas completed. So, Why not? It's also running your standard Undertaker synergies. It's got Flame Imps. It's got everything you need. This deck will work. The only thing I kind of wish was also in this deck was a Shadow Flame, but you can't win them all, folks. All right. And the last and final deck, Warrior. Okay, so we've seen a ton of Warrior control, but they've kind of been getting their asses handed to them. Yes, the age of Warrior dominance is slowly coming to an end. And what we've been seeing is Warriors then switching to a more aggressive deck. And I've been seeing this pop up a lot on Legend ranks and in less Legend ranks. I've actually faced up against this at multiple different points on the ladder, so don't be surprised by this. It's an Undertaker Warrior deck. Yes, because Undertaker works great for so many other classes, why not here? So if they get the Undertaker and they get the Haunted Creeper plays and Loot Hoarders and Leper Gnomes and things of that nature, and they build a really strong board against you, alright? Then they drop down Frothing Berserkers, and that's going to get a lot of great value. The moment you think you're going to get your Sludge Belchers out, they nail you with the Spellbreaker, and they just keep flooding and flooding. The deck runs 6 weapons just to continue pounding away. Use their face in order so your minions don't have to trade, and you always keep board presence. And hey, look at that, we have Brawl, because sometimes shit goes wrong. It does. I'd also like to point out it's running both Mortal and Heroic Strike. So what this kind of does is Heroic Strike, throw the song while you've got, oh, I don't know, Arcanite Reaper. Congratulations! Your weapon is now damn near a Pyroblast. Mortal Strike. Oh, so things didn't work out the way you thought it would. Oh, by the way, you now could cheese out like a hunter. Have a nice day. So, very, very strong. Lots of charge minions. Arcane Golem. I mean, a 4-2 for 3. Yes, there is a downside, but if you're always playing this on the back end, that downside is not that much of a downside, to be perfectly honest. Wolf Rider, great in between. Can fill in a lot of spots. Korcom, Elite, again, same reason. It's 4 mana. You can get a lot of value out of that. And yeah, the deck is solid. The deck is very, very nasty. And the only legendary that's running is Captain Greenskin. Why? Because we're running 6 weapons. Do you really need any more answer than that? Alright, so that'll wrap it up for this edition of the GvG Meta Report. I apologize for the lateness of this report. Unfortunately, Sundays are my time with my girlfriend, and she brought over Chinese food. Yeah, no, I was eating, alright? Deal with it. Anywho, I'd also like to thank the weather for finally getting cold in Florida, and I've stopped sweating. It's awesome. Don't forget to check out next week's GvG Meta Report. Hopefully we'll have a little bit more in-depth from the Battle of the Best series coming up here very soon. Alright, so don't forget to check that out as well. This is Shiv saying thank you so much for tuning in. I love all your support, all the comments. Keep them coming. If you like these videos, please like, subscribe, donate if you can. Whatever you got to do, man. I'd appreciate all the support you get. You guys are like family to me, and I love you all. Till next week. Good luck.